Hi, it's Tony Verhoeven, and we're talking industrial automation with Rick Caldwell of SCADAware. You're based in Bloomington, Illinois.
Illinois, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tony.
Absolutely.
This is fun. I haven't done this before.
Yeah. Me neither. It's my first time. No, just kidding.
I've seen you before.
Okay. I'm no professional, but it's a fun thing to be able to talk to our members and get to know them a little bit better. I barely get to talk to you guys at the conference, so and maybe as prospective customers, that you're going to go maybe meet one today, maybe they get to know you a little bit better.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, I believe firmly that, logos don't do business with logos. People do business with people.
It's all about people and relationships.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
So I guess maybe what we start with is, let's start with CSIA. You've been a member for how long?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that on the drive up. I really don't remember. I started SCADAware 18 years ago.
Okay.
And for quite a while, I sent my partner, who's now retired, and he was more of running the business as the manager. I was selling and more involved with the technology. So at least 10 years, I'd say.
Okay.
But we didn't join right away. I think there might have been some rules in the beginning about size or years in business or something. I don't recall. But I've been involved with CSI for a while and now participate some. I go to all the conferences, and I've spoken a couple of times at conferences, so I very much enjoy the CSIA.
Excellent.
I'll say one thing about it. When I first was involved with CSIA, my customers asked my customers, "Do you know what the CSIA is?" And for a while there, no one did. But I'll say here recently, the CSIA presence is becoming more known. And I had somebody say something to me, a customer say something to me just last week that I put a lot of value in. We're talking about business. I follow up with customers, so I do some selling and I'm involved with the technology, but I don't program and build things anymore. And I followed up with a customer after a nice project. It was a hard project, and it was a time crunch on a shutdown, and we had a lot of resources there, and there were some. As these listeners and other people that are in the same business as I'm in will know, there are times when you're wondering, are you going to make it? Mm-hmm. And we really poured the resources in. We had some 11th hour, can we get her done situations. When it was all said and done, I took the engineering manager to lunch and one of the engineers, and I said, how did we do? And he said, we worried a little there. You guys pulled it through, and you did a good job, and you guys put the time in, and he bragged about us. Then he said something that I thought was important I hadn't heard before. He said, you're a little above your competition. And I said, what do you mean? And that might not have been his exact words, but he talked about, we stand a little taller than the competition. And I said, why would that be? He says, I think it's because you're involved in CSIA. He says, you're paying attention to your business. And so that was important. It was important to hear.
That's great. Great to hear. And out there in the industry, a lot of businesses will want to become or even required to be ISO certified in whatever kind of industry, 9,000, whatever is, I guess, as appropriate. But a lot of people don't know even that CSI exists or that we have a certification.
Right.
And so,
and it's starting to become a little bit more. Customers are becoming more aware of the fact that this organization exists. And some of us are involved, and we're trying to follow the best practices, and we're doing some things correctly, and we're learning. I've always felt that, and maybe it's me, but and I don't want to be stereotypical, but I feel that guys like me that are technical guys, engineering types, and we make our living and have fun with our noses in a computer, writing code and building things, we're not always very good business people. So an organization like CSI is very helpful.
Is there anything specific that you can kind of put your finger on that really maybe helped you, or that maybe you're struggling with? You discover us 10, 12 years ago or something like that, and then you're like, oh, I'm really this is what I get out of this.
Well, I very much enjoy the networking amongst my peers. The peers are the best thing. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice, I talk too much. The best practices workshops, I send my guys through a new guy each year. To try and get on board with best practices and following some of the things that are outlined in CSIA. But for me, it's all about the peers and the peer group that we have that I'm involved in, and just the peers at the conferences. Sharon, the CSA is interesting to me because we're all competitors of sorts. We have different geographical locations, so we're oftentimes not on the same projects. There might be a time when we are, but not often, at least with my immediate peers. But there's an element of sharing in every aspect of the conference, in every meeting, in every discussion. Guys like me that own businesses, or guys like my engineering peers, whatever they are, we're all sharing experiences. Oh, we had this problem, or here's how we do this. Just a matter of fact, just yesterday, I drove to Indianapolis to one of my peer group offices. One of the members of my peer group, I emailed them and said, we're really struggling with resource management as we're growing. The economy's good, we're growing the business, and our tools are disparate pieces of software, one for accounting, one for time entry, another for CRM, another for tracking resources. You know, all these little pieces, and we're struggling with putting together a piece that I'd love to find a software that works from top to bottom, does the whole thing, and it just doesn't seem to exist. So I'm focused lately on, internally, on better tools to manage resources and make better use of everybody's time. In other words, a guy has to be he's billable for this period, and then we don't want, an idle period. We want him billable right here, a little break and then go again. And when we look at our resource chart, if the phone rings and a customer says, hey, I need Bill, and I really like Bill, can I have Bill? When do you want him? Well, I want him next week. Well, let me look. And just to be able to look at that instant picture, where is everybody today? And where are they tomorrow and next week and the week after? I don't have anybody named Bill. It might work for me, by the way. So anyway, the story is, I drove to this other peer of mine, competitors, 3 hours drive to the east, Indianapolis, and he gave me a half a day, him and his general manager, engineering manager, and they shared their tools with me. I had a couple of my project managers with me. These are good things, and we'll do the same thing for others if they need help, and we've done this before, so we help each other. I suppose that's the single best outcome of CSIA, besides making a lot of friends. It's just the sharing and helping each other. It's fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I love to hear those stories where, you'll find, the other thing I hear was you'll find integrators will help each other. You'll have a customer, and maybe you don't have the resources available.
I've done that too.
Yeah, you say, hey, can you go help John?
We've shared projects where it made sense, where somebody's is topped out. They don't have resources for a job. We'll step in, and we've reached out when we were out of resources and reached out to our peers in a peer group, say, can you do this job? Ultimately, it's about taking care of the customer. Of course, we all want to stay in business, and we want to make a little money and have a successful business, but this is really a people business, and if we can't do a job, and if I know there's a peer group member or somebody that can do it, we'd give that out and we'll let somebody else do that job and take care of the customer.
Now, the name of the company is SCADAware, but that's not all you do, right?
Well, and that's so. I called it SCADAware. I had an influencer and an old friend that's recently passed away, Dick Morley, and when I decided to go into business, I called him and said, I'm on the internet trying to find the word control that I can roll into my name cleverly. And I just want to, something different. There's a lot of people say, this kind of control or that kind of control. And the name was so used up, or the word was so used up, that I couldn't find anything. And Dick knew that I had built a very large PC-based, personal computer-based SCADA system. In the early days, SCADA was more proprietary. Maybe part of a DCS, distributed control system, or proprietary from front to back, I/O to software. And somewhere in the 80s, when personal computers became real tools we could use, people were making softwares that were SCADA-type softwares, often thought of more of an HMI, one PLC to one computer kind of a thing in the mid-80s. But I had built a large PC-based SCADA personal computer. 286 was out, and I tell people that. Now I don't know who's listening to this when they play it, but you and young folks will say, "What's a 286?" Well, for us old guys, that was the x86 architecture Intel came out with. The 286, in my opinion, was the first viable machine we could use to do work, and it had this whopping 10 meg hard drive, not 10 gig, 10 meg, and I knew with that kind of storage and all the power of the 286, I could build a real SCADA system, and I built a SCADA system with close to 300 PLCs on it with DOS computer. So I built this thing and published it, and Dick said, why don't you use the word SCADA because you did this thing. And I said, that's a good idea. I'll call it SCADA this, SCADA. And he said, well, don't you write software too? And I said, well, yeah, I've done some, different, some C and some other things. He said, well, just call it SCADAware. So really, he named my company. And then so I wrote it out, and I said, SCADAware, well, that's pretty cool. And I started looking on the internet, and nobody had anything called SCADAware that I could find. And there was no domain names anyway with that name. And it turns out there was somebody that had a name of software, and I didn't see it, or I probably would have showed something else. But then he rang me back and said, hey, do it with uppercase SCADA and lowercase ware, and that'll look cool. And so that's how it happened. So there it is. See, big SCADA, lower ware.
There it is.
So we do much more than that. And we are just a typical controls integrator. We do control panels. We have not built panels for most of the 18 years. We've, a few years ago, decided to venture into, I deliberately ignored panel business and contracted that out. And we still do contract much of it out. But we build panel select for our own project, and selectively with some customers that are close and local will build. So we have a small panel operation. It's not the biggest piece of my business, but we design all our control systems. We work with several brands of PLCs in different vertical markets, and do the whole thing. Besides, we don't just do SCADA. It might have been a mistake making the name of the company SCADAware, because people really do think when they see the name that we focus on SCADA, and that's all we do. Well, we're actually quite good at big SCADA systems, but we do other things too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Dick. So talk about Dick and your friendship with Dick and his impact on everything that you do, right? Obviously, you and customers and everybody really owes Dick a huge debt.
Dick was important to me. And I was a young guy trying to make my way, and we all knew. I don't know if everybody still knows who Dick is, but in the days when I was starting out, he was a name. Modicon PLC was his invention. Modular Digital Control, I think, was his company, abbreviated down to Modicon. And I don't know if I have that exactly right, but it was something like that. But he was interesting to me, and after I built that big SCADA system that I just mentioned, somebody, I don't remember who, as I was building it, and maybe even more than one folks, one of my software vendors perhaps, or the hardware people selling me computers, said, you should publish this. And I thought, do I really want to do that? I was a programmer. I was a builder of things. I didn't want to write, and so I did publish it. I said, okay, and I committed to it. I said, I'm going to publish this. Once you obligate yourself, I said, well, if I don't say this to people, then I won't do it. So I obligated myself. I said, I'm going to publish this, and so I did. And as soon as I published it, people asked me to speak, and I thought, I have to go in front of people and speak. That's just a little different than sitting and writing PLC code, but it's okay, I'll do it. So I committed to a presentation at what was the IPC? IPC. It was an annual conference back when trade shows were bigger than they are today, when we all went to trade shows. And it was a conference in Detroit at Cobo Hall. So I gave my speech, and it went pretty well, actually. I was real pleased with it. It was a lot of work. I was nervous, of course. And following the speech, I went down to there was a keynote lunch. I went down to the cafeteria, whatever, all the big giant circular tables. And it was a come as you are sitting. Everybody was joining everybody, and nobody knew. I didn't know. I just all by myself. I didn't know anybody. I sat at a table, and a fellow sat about where you are next to me, and the third guy over, in comes Dick Morley. I looked at Dick and I said, Dick Morley. He looked over and says, hi. He shook my hand. I said, we're all here because of you. And he said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, Dick, this is the International Programmable Controller Conference. And I said, and you invented it. And he looked at me, he said, I didn't invent that thing. And I thought, did I have this wrong? And I says, sure you did. And he says, oh, no. He said, no, he says, that was just an idea whose time had come, and I happened to be the fellow working on it. And it was a humble explanation of how he came across and came up with the PLC. So he didn't know me, but of course I knew him. So I made it a point to reach out to him. And I figured out, maybe we traded business cards, I don't remember. Somehow I got his phone number, and I began to call his secretary to see if he was going to a conference. So I sought him out more in the beginning, of course, and he was a busy guy, and I was young and eager to learn, see if he could, teach me something. And we started meeting at the ISA show. I did two shows religiously. It was National Manufacturing Week in Chicago. It was every year at McCormick Place. And the ISA, which moved around. The ISA was more of a process show in those days. It was Instrument Society of America, which is now, I think, Industrial Society of Automation or something, name change. So the society has changed, but that was my process show that I attended, and National Manufacturing Week was the discrete, the manufacturing show. So I met Dick, and we had a breakfast or lunch or dinner or something every show, and we became friends, and I made trips to the barn, and when I had an idea, he'd help me brainstorm it, or if he was writing something, he turned out to be an interesting writer. Towards the end of his career, he wrote a lot. He would call me as the practical guy, the guy that said, okay, Rick, I'm going to have this. What would you do with it? And we'd brainstorm, and I'd go out and sit on the porch and talk. And I don't know how I helped him, but I would just talk, and I just ramble like I'm doing now and talking. He'd say, oh, that's a good idea. And I'd think, I wonder what my idea was. I got to go. And he'd hang. So something I said would trigger, and he'd put it in his story, whatever he's writing. So we became friends. And I made several trips to the barn and did things, and had a lot of fun with him. But he was a good mentor to me and taught me some things. And I'll miss him, and I'm sure we all the people who knew him will miss him. He was
Absolutely.
a very interesting fellow.
Absolutely. If you're not familiar with Dick Morley, Google him. He's not hard to find, and you'll be really amazed
he did
on how
some
much
things,
influence he had. Yeah,
he was a neat
absolutely.
guy, real neat guy.
So Rick, let's change gears here a little bit. Have you always wanted to be a control system engineer? Did this somehow choose you, or did you choose it?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, when you say always, so I'm an old guy. So back when I was a youngster, there weren't any control systems integrators that I know of. I don't know that the PLC wasn't around yet. And I grew up in Peoria, Illinois. I was born in California, in Merced. My dad was in the Air Force, and he calls me the $15 baby. I don't know if he calls me that, but he said that once. He said, yeah, you only cost $15. So he was in the Air Force, and I was born at an Air Force base in Merced. And but the family's from Peoria, and we went home, and I was a little guy, so I don't remember California then. And he took a job as a plumber, and he was when he got out of the Air Force, he became a plumber and started his own business. And he worked for years for others, and so and he had his own business. And as a young person, of course, you follow your dad around and try and be like your dad, and you do the things that he does. And so I became a plumber, and it was I don't mean I was I did a plumbing. I started a plumber's apprenticeship, but I worked from every summer as a young person with Dad, and plumbing houses and apartments and whatever, and repairs and service and building new things. But my influence was trades. So besides him, all the family and friends and associations in Peoria were tradespeople. So I didn't really know what an engineer was. I heard the word, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know what it meant to be an electrical engineer versus some other kind of engineer. And it was far from my mind. But I probably should have known that I was destined to be an electrical engineer. It's where I needed to go, because in my spare time, I tinkered. I was very happy with electronics. I built, if I wasn't building something, I wasn't happy as a kid. I had to build something. I had Rector sets, and some of you older folks might remember the Noralco mechanical engineer and Noralco electrical engineering sets. Had those Heath kits. We could build radios and walkie-talkies and stereos and TV, and build everything with the Heath kit. It was wonderful for a young guy that liked electronics. I'd go to the library and check out books with schematics, and go to the radio stores, buy components, and build things. I built FM radio, a tiny little one, to be a room bug, and stick it in rooms, and I could turn on an FM channel, listen to the people talk in the house. I mean, I was a tinkerer. If I wasn't building something, it wasn't right for me. So it was a good fit as a control integrator. So as I moved through my life, I didn't go right to school after high school. I said, well, Dad's got a nice plumbing business. I'll go to work. So I started my plumber's apprenticeship, and it wasn't long before the time went. So my plumbing experience was always summers. I'd work in the summer as a plumber, and I'd go back to school, and summer back to school. Well, the school didn't come, and I liked working with my dad, and I kind of liked the plumbing business. I was, by then pretty good at it, and I could do things with my hands. But I knew at heart that it didn't satisfy me technically. I needed to go a step further. So I began seeking what it would be. Still didn't think about the engineering role. So I started working in the plants around Peoria, factories in different places, and trying different jobs. And I remember clearly one night, this was 10 years after high school, so I've worked plumbing for a while, and I've done a lot of things. I was a machinist, and I did things, and many things, and tried things, which actually became a pretty good background for what I'm doing now, because I've been in I was actually in these plants as an hourly worker, running machines and doing things. And now I have a pretty good hands-on experience at many things. So I got this broad background. And one day, it was around Christmas time, I remember relaxing one evening, and I saw an advertisement on television about some technical school, I don't recall, and it hit me, and I thought, well, I should have been an electrical engineer. By now, I'm a little more aware of what things are. I'm out of school for a while and been around. And Mom, I go to school. I was still single, and I thought, well, I have time for this. So I started back to school, and I started seeking jobs that would line up with my school, so I'd get the right experience. And I had some catching up to do. Out of school for 10 years, so I had to catch up on all the math and things. And it was all fun. I liked school, and I liked math. I liked doing it. So it was a lot of fun going back to school. And I'd matured some, and I wasn't really ready for that when I got to high school. Everybody does things differently, and mine was different. Part of my problem was I was a bit of I was always torn between motorcycles and technology. So the Harley was pulling me away from. So I went back to school and got refocused on the right things, and I started seeking jobs in fields that would suit an engineer. And I took a job at a place that did generator controls, and it was called Custom Engineering in Peoria. And I built switchgear and control panels, and that was early in. Of course, it was mid-'80s, so PLCs were around, but in that industry they weren't popular. So these were relays. This was relay control. So we'd have many cabinets with relays. So I would design and build those cabinets, wire them, and test the generators. Had a lot of fun with that. And then I started longing for the PLC and the programming of the PLC. So I met a fellow at the gym that I worked out in that worked at a place near Peoria that had a division that did robots and custom automation equipment. So I asked for an introduction to the owner. He introduced me, and I ended up with a job there. And it was a fun job building custom automation equipment. And I taught myself PLC programming. I designed a system, sold a system. We got to go into the customers and look. It was a solution thing. So we'd go to the customer and say, what are you trying to do? And this was before iPhones and all the tools. So we'd sketch out the layout, and we'd take components back with us, and we'd sit and brainstorm the piece of equipment. We build them. And so I sold one and built it, and it was time to program it. So I get my first PLC, and everybody went home on Friday night and had everything ready to go. And I came back in early Saturday morning with my little handbook and my terminal. We didn't have laptops for the PLCs in those days. Had a regular terminal. We'd have to little screen. We'd have program and ladder logic. Of course, I knew relay logic, so by Monday morning it was running, and I taught myself PLC programming, and I just went from there, and it was just a lot of fun for me. And so as a kid tinkering, I got to be an adult tinkering and building. It was the same kind of same thing. So it just one step from that, and I helped start a car plant. Which really got me a little deeper into programming and a little closer to manufacturing from an engineering perspective and a control perspective. And from there, I went into doing what I'm doing now.
Excellent.
It just all happened.
Yeah.
I just couldn't find my way as a young person. And once I figured out, I wanted to continue tinkering. Then I got to be a controls integrator, and it gives us a chance to tinker every day.
Right,
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. New challenges every day.
Every day is a new challenge, yeah.
So let's talk about, I guess maybe a challenge these days is internet security, right? And so now these days, things are moving from analog to digital, things are internet connected. Maybe talk a little bit about your challenges, or maybe explaining these challenges to a customer. Where does that lie?
The challenge of security?
The challenge of security, or maybe is the challenge maybe explaining that there are some major issues with the at the customer level, that they should be more prepared.
Well, we're all worried about security. It isn't just in the industrial market. It's because we're all connected. Everything today is connected. We now have IoT. We're talking about connecting the internet right down to the sensor. My refrigerator is connected, and my stove and my doorbells are everything's on the internet today. Yeah. And in the world, we have troublemakers. And troublemakers exist everywhere. And if you get a good programmer that's a troublemaker, and he can come in and have some fun with you. So it isn't just industrial. We're all worried about what can happen. And I'm sure everybody everybody in the audience that's watching this will say, gee, I had to get a new credit card today or a new debit card because somebody hacked in. So this happens. But for the industrial sector, we have something that's happening, a process. It could be something, an entry from a security breach of some sort. It could cost money. In manufacturing, it costs money. In some of the process industries, it could cause injury or death. So we're worried about these things. Mm-hmm. So security is a big thing. I'm not a security expert. But I have people that work for me that are better than I am at it. But it's about proper design. In the early days, and I was participatory early networks in factories. As a matter of fact, the SCADA system I talked about that I built was in a factory. It wasn't really a true SCADA. We used the data acquisition side more than the supervisory control. But it was a SCADA software and a SCADA system. But it was, in those days, there was one network from top to bottom. And there wasn't much Ethernet. Well, actually, that plant, in those days, plants didn't have much Ethernet. They had a token ring, and then eventually Ethernet came, and now is the standard. But the point is that we didn't have Ethernet everywhere. And once we broached or brought Ethernet into the factory, it was one network, top to bottom. So anybody on the network could go anywhere. And the first step in security is dividing and making a shop floor network. Now we want that connectivity, so maybe you have an enterprise network, and maybe you have the corporate network if you have multiple plants and you have multiple layers, and you have protection between those layers. It's very important, but we've learned as we've gone along, and we're still learning. And I know there are people out there that specialize in security systems for our PLC and their SCADA systems and all the industrial controls out there. Now that the whole world is connected and our controls are connected, just like your laptop's connected, it's time to look at all that. And I bring those guys in. And I don't have the answers to all of it, but we have some partners that are providers and help us on those things and give us the proper advice.
Excellent, excellent. So as we're wrapping up here, let's talk about having those great people on board, right? And so a good business owner, a good boss realizes that there's limitations to what they can do and accomplish and know. So you've brought on some good folks on board. Let's talk a little bit about maybe this. Let's talk about the 18-year-old or the 20-year-old Rick Caldwell out there that's haven't quite found their way out there. What sort of skills should they develop? You were talking about how you maybe you were thinking ahead. You're like, I'm going to take jobs that help me develop my skills. Mm-hmm. What are some of those skills that you would want in hiring a system engineer or a system integrator employee?
Well, there's of course we're very technical, and we look for electrical engineers for the most part. But I really like a hybrid. I like an electrical engineer that also has a little bit of a computer science background, that knows how to program computers. So there are very few control systems today that don't have some sort of computer interface on them. And so even if it's a simple SCADA or HMI software, or even an HMI panel, there's software there. Now, electrical engineer, if he's gone through that training and he's smart enough to get through that, he can program. But the guys that have a little bit of a mix of some software, just computer software programming background, that rounds them out nicely. Mm-hmm. So the technical side is important. When I hunt for somebody, I look for a mix of that. We hunt for more electrical engineers than computer science people, but we have a mix. And we also look for something that's hard to find in very, very technical people, and that's people skills. So we work for people, and we have to interface to people. We have to go out and meet a person, and we have to talk to that person and learn what that person needs for their company they work for. We're working for them, and they're working for their company, and we're trying to help the whole organization accomplish something. And so the soft skills, people skills are important, and sometimes hard for the very, very technical person. So I'm always excited when I find an engineer that's a smart engineer, and he can communicate with me and with others. And I'm even more excited if he can write and write his operation maintenance manuals when he's done, and instructions and things. We need a rounded person, but everybody is different and everybody has different strengths. So we hire diversity, a mix of people and different kinds of people, and embrace all sorts of different skill sets. And amongst the group, there maybe have one guy over here that's just phenomenal in one area, and somebody over here that's good in another. And the fact that we have two of them makes the business a little better. But I will say this about young folks coming into the integration business, though. If they are the kind of person that likes to know each day what to expect, they want to be in their comfort zones and just go to work and know that this is what they do every day, they don't want to be in the integration business. But if they're the kind of person that wants a challenge and a great deal of disparity in one job versus the next, and something different, they want a surprise, they want to try something they've never done, this is a good place to be, because very seldom do you do the same thing two times. And you can learn. Each time you can learn. If you like to learn and try things you haven't done, if you're excited about the challenge, something technical, that facing something that you don't know how to do, and this is the place to be because you can learn some neat things. So every day, it doesn't mean we don't do some similar things day by day, but there's a great deal of diversity in the work, different kinds of work. We're in different industries. We're working in the manufacturing industry. We work in the water, freshwater and wastewater treatment industry. We work in the pharmaceutical industry, in the food and beverage industry, and we have a team that works in I'll say agricultural, but the grain side of agriculture. So I'm in Illinois. I'm in downstate Illinois, central Illinois, and so we have farmers. There's grain handling. So we have grain handling and dryers and seed plants, and so all these things are very different. One's different than another. So you can come to work as an integrator and you can learn many, many things and have a different day every day if you like that kind of a challenge. It's a lot of fun.
Sounds exciting.
It is fun. It's
very
exciting.
Good.
Yeah.
Rick, any parting words as we're wrapping up here?
Well,
you'd like to cover or say?
Well, just thanks for inviting me in.
I appreciate you coming.
It was fun to sit and chat with you, and I hope I didn't ramble too much about things that weren't important. But
I love the ramble. I think you mentioned some great things that will bring up some great memories for some folks. So.
I would encourage young engineers to consider control systems integration, automation. It's growing. The technology is changing day by day, so it's fun, it's challenging. And I would encourage all of the integrators out there, if you're listening, get involved with CSIA. It's the continuous improvement effort for your business is very, very important. And I think without CSIA, I wouldn't have known some of the things about just being a better business person. I might have been a better programmer, I might have been a better engineer, or whatever happened. But the business side of my business was really supported and grew because of CSIA. So I guess thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for being a great member.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah.
Rick Caldwell, SCADAware. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.